I wet the lower part of the sheet for now. I try to go around the shoreline along its boundary. I've decided to wet the right part completely, even the stone. Next I take a smaller flat white brush, mine is number 25, it's my favorite flat pony brush. I mix color for the first wash and I start with two colors. In my case it's Horizon Blue by Mijello and Cerulean Blue by Van Gogh. They're similar in hue. You can take other similar colors. Actually, Horizon Blue can differ across sets. Mijello have other nice colors, for example, Compose Blue and also Dazzling Blue. Other brands surely have their equivalents. Don't pay too much attention to the brand. I like Mijello for the diversity of blue hues that they offer, but I don't urge you to buy this brand in particular. You can use any other brand. Okay, so I try to apply this blue color to the place where the sky most prominently reflects in the water. Take guidance from the reference. The more carefully you observe it before you start painting, the easier it will be for you. If you find it difficult to navigate, I suggest that you do a small color study so that you can find the relationship of these two colors. Maybe not even just two colors, but an overall color study. Here we are most interested in the blue color of the sky reflected in the water and the green color of the rocks reflected in the water. The color of the rocks is also curious. It's kind of red and orange with some sand tone. It's got a complex color, and we can also find it, mix it, before we get down to the main course of work. Okay, I'm going to mix one more color, adding Horizon Blue to our previous mix, a little orange and Naples Yellow. We see that the depth of water changes in the foreground. There is little water there, so the sand bed practically has its local color there. And we should show it. I do it through this greenish hue. You can try and mix your own colors that you see in the reference. I add even more orange and red in the foreground. So I've checked the names of the hues I use in my palette. It's Permanent Madder Purple by Rembrandt and Madder Red. I've created swatches for all the colors I use in these works, so you can easily understand it and find something similar. This is a warm mix. I slightly mute it with ultramarine, especially in the background, so that I get a more neutral tone. I also use this ochre mix to cover the shore. I make the background a bit lighter using a tissue because the stones in the distance are very light. I'm adding more ultramarine now and show this slight movement. It's not waves, it's more like different hues of water. Remember that watercolor tends to get a bit lighter after drying. A lot of things influence this, so you need to practice a lot to learn how your particular materials behave. I now take a different brush. It's a wire-bound mop brush by Zitang Art. It's also got a fine tip, and I take advantage of it to add these blue tones with violet in order to show the seaweed on the sand bed. We can see that in the distance the seaweed underwater is more blue in tone, and where the water is more shallow it's more violet and even maroon in tone, so try to get the color right. And of course it's affected by the water column above, so it will be blue in tone to a certain extent anyway. Using a blue tone, we create the feeling that it's actually underwater. We cannot use its local color. Compare it now that I'm painting the seaweed in the foreground. It's more brown in tone. We can mix this color using orange, ultramarine, adding a little red ochre or maroon. My alternative for maroon here is permanent madder purple. Or you can add a little actual maroon. It also depends on what you have. I continue enriching the sand bed with these hues. We can sprinkle it a little like this, using beige tones, this way imitating little stones underwater. I'll remind you that we try to paint everything underwater on wet. I continue darkening things. We can confidently make the seaweed darker in the foreground. It's actually like this in the reference. Remember to look at the reference every now and then. I go in these wave-like movements and continue darkening the seaweed underwater. I've chosen this diagonal movement that will help the viewer's eye glide across water and reach the stones and the reflections to contemplate them. We can blur some areas using a fan brush. I can't imagine what I would do without it. I love my fan brush. It's by Pinex and it's synthetic. I'm sure other brands have equivalent brushes. I take a fine tip brush now. It's a reservoir brush by Pinex again. In this case, what we're looking for is the fine tip. It will help us define some details while the wash is still moist. We can try and paint some stones. It depends on the wetness level of your paper, whether it will work out or not. So go ahead and try. I'll zoom it in so that you can see it better. We'll actually work with the stones a bit later on dry. So here I simply want to show you purely out of interest this degree of detailing, and these techniques are possible, and we can paint little stones on wet too. My goal in this course is to show you as many different watercolor techniques as possible so that in the future you can choose methods suitable in every particular case. While the wash is still moist, we can darken some things, add shadows, look for some stones on the sand bed. I'm doing all this so that the sand bed doesn't look flat and smooth. I use the same brush that I painted the stones with, and I sprinkle, create these drops. This way I imitate the stones underwater, and you can see how vivid these sprinkles looked before, but they got a few tones lighter after drying.